So this year was the 16th anniversary of Michael Jackson's passing. So something about it felt correct when I saw it pop up for free to watch recently. And so, on principle, as a longtime Michael Jackson fan, I decided, what the heck, just give it a watch. And initially, I hadn't intended to talk about this movie on the channel. And then I thought about it, and I said, I hadn't really talked about it at all, probably since I watched it when it came out. And so, thought this was a good time to break my schedule of planned movies that I was going to discuss and just take a quick break from that and unpack Michael Jackson's This Is It. You know what time it is.
This is it. This is it.
So I have a dear friend from high school who might be watching this video. And if she is, she'll know this story. When this movie came out, she and I went to go see the movie. And afterwards, we talked about it. And I remember what I told her was that it was cool to see. But I felt I was angry. There was this like void I felt when we left the theater. And I was sad, but then more than the sadness, I was angry. And the reason for that was because I felt like we were robbed. It was the biggest sort of disappointment. Like fans were robbed, but also the world was robbed. And not just I'm not just talking about the great performances we would have gotten, but whatever the next phase of Michael Jackson's life after that, when he stopped performing, he had this elder statesman position he was moving further into. And he just, that's all gone. We lost all that. We lost also, I think the arts world lost out. He was such an artist, like the embodiment of what it is to be an artist. Like, we've seen it obviously with his music and his live performances and all that stuff. But Michael also had, aspirations for other things. He was a great visual artist. If you've seen any of his drawings, he was a fantastic visual artist. And he would have been a great artistic director somewhere. He would have been like this sort of key choreographer for certain groups or whatever it is. Like his mind was a gift. His spirit was a gift. And so I think there's a huge loss in that way. That was the biggest thing that I left the film with. And as such, I was so disappointed. Obviously, naturally, it came out on DVD, so I have the DVD, and I'd watched parts I thought were my favorite parts or whatever it is. But every time there was this tinge of like pain and like sadness, and I hadn't seen it in some years now. So this time, I watched it recently, and the difference, I didn't feel as much sadness this time, because in a weird way, look, if you think about it, Michael Jackson's presence is still kind of around. It still feels like he's around. Like if you look on social media now, different places, there's memes abound. There's tons of clips of his short films and things out there. There's almost there's fan edits of different music stuff, unreleased tracks that people are still finding. So in a way, it's weird. It almost feels like he's still around. So watching it this time, it just felt like I get appreciating the body of work that Michael has left us with. One of the gifts, I think, of something like this is seeing the which you don't see too often today. You do and you don't, but I think that not to this extent. You get to see the artist at work. It's cool to see the finished product of stuff, but as someone who appreciates the arts, like, it's also cool to see how the art is built. And this documentary gives us a pretty good idea of the process, and not just the overall process, but the nitty gritty of it, like how certain songs were performed and how they were embodied, the little direction to musicians and to vocalists as to how they would do it. Like, you would think you would be forgiven, I think, there's a, if you've seen any of Michael Jackson's live performances, there is probably an element of it that feels samey. But if you look closer, you'll see it's actually not the same. Many of his tours obviously have a lot of the same, have like key songs that are always performed, dance numbers that are always done. You've seen this in the music videos as well. We know the dance numbers, we know the music, so there's an element of familiarity there. And to that extent, the negative on that could be noted is that it's just the same stuff. But I'm here to tell you that's a mistake to think that way. When you watch this, there's an element of like, you know the songs, you know the dances. But what this documentary was giving us is like a whole other layer of experience that, yes, the moves are the same. There's a depth to it that automatically makes it feel different, more expansive. Maybe it's the sets. Maybe it's the way the stages were being lit. Maybe it was all the new film material that they shot specifically for these shows. There was other things added to it that made it a much more rich experience. And this was just the rehearsals. The rehearsals felt like, oh, you could get the feel of it, of what the shows would have been, is there. Like you get the sense that they obviously would be doing some tightening up or whatever it is, but like the skeleton of it, the brass bones of the show is here, and that's amazing. It's like listening to Michael Jackson's demos. If you've heard any of Michael Jackson's demos, how his demos were like expertly produced. Like some of his demos are like they could be released as is, as regular tracks. Like the instruments probably don't sound as polished or whatever, but that doesn't matter. The idea of the song is there and it's fully formed. Even early versions of certain songs feel like, yo, that's a single. You can release that. You can release this. There's a ton of his music that's like that, and this, for all intents and purposes, it's a demo, of the show, the rehearsals of it, which is still pretty awesome. Once the ball gets rolling in earnest, and we get hit with the set list, it feels like a theme park ride, in the best way. Like multiple theme park rides. It's like being at Disneyland and going to, or any, Great America, whatever your theme park is, and experiencing all the different rides. That's what this documentary is like. And it's the most like that when you compare it to other Michael Jackson shows. You get a taste of this kind of stuff if you've seen the history tour. You can see where the ideas were going, and it's actually not. It didn't start with history either. You see traces of it in Dangerous, but I think that's where it really started. But history starts because it feels it's grander. You start getting like spaceship stuff and like set, like props on set, like life-size props and things on set. So by the time you get to this, though, this is like that times 10. You get huge set pieces, and tons of cinematic stuff. Not just film and sequences that were shot, but just the staging and the blocking of the different songs, the different performances were set up in a way that was expansive. It was bigger than the stage, theatrical. And but this ties into the theatrics of Michael. Michael Jackson had a theatricality about him, and the show is a great example of the different parts of that can come out. He had theatricality about him, and the show reflects that. There are tons of ideas in this documentary executed, and I think there's a couple highlights. The thing I want to talk about. It's not a secret. Michael Jackson was a lover of film. He had aspirations to be an actor, and this, like some of his other short films, this felt like a good example of him getting to exercise that muscle, and not only be also be a director. Like you'd see sections of him directing certain sequences, and of course you get to see him acting along the likes of like Humphrey Bogart, and like you get to see him with Rita Hayworth. So that's cool to see him in these other ways too. It's not just he's not doing the stuff that you expect. In a lot of ways, spiritually, it's the same stuff. Everything from how things are performed to how things are shot and edited. The visual effects on display are really cool. Thriller has a really good set piece stuff that was reshot, like new stuff that was shot. Costume design stuff was elaborate, and you really get the sense that there are a lot of things being combined to make something special. Another favorite set piece of mine, Billie Jean. It might be my favorite Michael Jackson song, but that, first of all, hands down has the best live action, high quality audio of any live Billie Jean performance I've seen, and this includes any of the tours. This version is as crisp as the studio version. It's great. You don't even have to watch it. Put it on, listen to it. It's excellent, and the vocalists are ridiculous. It's crazy stuff. Earth Song has another great, cinematic situation added to it. The section to do with The Way You Make Me Feel, also great. The in-depth conversation about how certain notes are played, like, and how that was very like specific. Michael was super specific about how the notes should be played. And on one hand, it feels like as a fan, you're like, why does that even need to be a conversation? The music director, the guy on the piano, whoever it is, you know the song just as well as anybody else knows. Why is that even play the song how you heard it? Like, just do it. Don't try to be funky. Don't try to do it how you know it's supposed to sound. But I think it's a cool nugget for a fan just to see that conversation and just to know and to learn like why that's important, why that conversation is important. It's easy to go in thinking, oh, just do it how you're supposed to do it. You know the songs, but that's part of the gift of rehearsal, is that even when you think you know stuff, rehearsing it is cool because you can discover things along the way, and you get to be reminded of the stuff that you maybe don't know as well. And for fans to get a peek into that process, that's really cool. I loved that. I also loved the way Michael embodies the music. It's not just that he's performing it. Like, there's a lot of physical, like there's plenty of performers who embody the stuff. This is kind of part of what it is to perform stuff, but it's unique to every performer. You can feel it how he becomes the song. It's a treat to see. So the other thing that was cool that I didn't realize, I just learned on this viewing, that, and I didn't know that this might be something that took place every time Michael Jackson performed this song live, but Human Nature, when the chorus hits, there is an echo effect. And I always assumed that was Michael's voice being echoed. But if you watch this documentary, there's a section in the Human Nature set where Michael is working with one of his longtime vocalists, and they're performing the chorus in practice, and the vocalist is performing the echo, and it made me think, oh shoot, was this always the case? Every time he performed the chorus and the echo effect was heard, was that not Michael's voice all that time, and that was this other guy's voice, or whoever the other vocalist was? It's a cool little nugget. But I mention it because you see them working it out, and that's cool to see how, like, you could tell there was a conversation about when the vocalist would come in to hit the echo, and there's eye contact. So Michael's performing, and the vocalist is right there watching him, like 2 feet away, whatever. Like, really, so it's something special to watch the makings of what would have been this massive show, and understand all the pieces it took to build that. It's not just having the songs there and having the musicians there and the dancers and doing all that. But when you start drilling down to the sort of the molecules, the atoms of what make the show go, and you see stuff like how important eye contact is, how the different musicians have to watch him do a gesture to do an accent or whatever it is. Some of these songs that are performed live, there are accent marks and ticks and beats that are obviously not in the studio version, and it's something else that adds more electricity, more life to the song. I find myself when I'm listening to some of the studio versions sometimes wishing that the accents were there when you do a hand gesture or whatever and the music responds to it, like it's but there's eye contact that needs to happen to make that possible, to make a ding, like a it's really cool to see that stuff being put together. There's a lot more things to say about this movie, but I'm gonna leave it with this. One of the more touching elements of this documentary is the opening sequence, where you have a bunch of hopefuls, dancers who hope to be featured dancers on this show. Each of them are talking about how they learned about the audition and what they did to get there, and all this. They're all emotional, and they're all and they talk. A lot of them talk about how they grew up being inspired by Michael Jackson, and how they became dancers behind Michael Jackson, and all these other things. But I think, like those dancers, for fans of Michael Jackson and his work, the documentary serves a similar function. And I think even more so for people who are creatives. You're inspired by that spirit. And Michael had that spirit in spades. You're always trying to chase this feeling of electricity and wanting your whatever you make to feel alive. There's a kinship I felt as a fan listening to other fans who happen to be in this position to potentially get to dance with him for his final shows. What a trip that must have been for them, even for those who didn't make it. So if you find yourself with some extra time at some point, and you haven't seen this documentary, whatever you think about Michael Jackson, you can't deny that he was a genius. He was a visionary. And this show, even though it wasn't complete, it displays that. We get to see all these ideas. And to say nothing of Kenny Ortega, we have to talk about him too, just briefly. Kenny Ortega has directed several of Michael Jackson's his tours. I think the gift of Kenny Ortega is that he, obviously he had a working relationship with Michael and known him long enough to be able to be this container for all these ideas and all these things there, and be able to sort of work not just with Michael but the dancers and everybody else to ensure that the show would have a cohesiveness, because even at this state, even in this stage, even in the form that we got, it is cohesive. Anyway, I love this film, and I obviously recommend it. Obviously recommended it. So if you find yourself with some extra time, and you want to see some artists doing some cool stuff, and it's not just Michael, you see artists. There's other artists featured from the costume design, people who design costumes, and how they're creating new things that weren't like new tech to get certain things achieved that couldn't be done before. It's kind of wild when people do that kind of stuff. Like, I think that's kind of that's very much a George Lucas thing, a James Cameron thing, where you have ideas that you want to achieve, and you don't have the tools to make it right now, and you figure out a way to do it. And you see some elements of that on display here. It's a real treat for artist people. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there. I've been talking too long about this already. I'm going to leave it there. But if you've seen this and you have thoughts, I'm genuinely curious to hear what you think. But on that note, I'm going to take off. If you stuck around to the end of this video, thank you for watching. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next video.